Hey guys, so in this video we'll be talking about how to evaluate the credibility of your sources. So a lot of the times when you're doing research, you might just go online and Google whatever topic you're writing on, and then whatever sources pop up, you just pick a couple of those and you use them for your paper. However, you should be evaluating the credibility of those sources before you use them. And you want to look out for things like the author's credentials, the currency of the information, etc. So what you want to do is you want to conduct a CRAP test on your sources in order to make sure it's credible and reliable. So let's talk about what the CRAP test means. First, we have the C, which means currency. How up to date is the information? So some questions to ask yourself when you are evaluating the currency of information. When was the information published or last updated? So you want to look out for the publication date or the last update just to make sure it falls within the range of how far back you should go for information. If you are looking for historical information, then you can go as far back as you need to go because history oftentimes doesn't change. So if you need to go like 20, 30, 40 years to find that information, then that's okay. If you're looking for something that's been around for a little while, but it hasn't really changed that much, then maybe 10 years or so is a good number. If you're looking for something that is constantly updated, but it's also been around for a while, maybe about 5 years you can go back. Or if you're looking for something that's just happening or unfolding right now, as we have with the COVID pandemic, then you can look for information maybe within the last 1 to 2 years. So your topic really guides how far back you should be going when you're looking for information. But I would say like a general number is about 5 to 10 years. If you're going further back than that, then there should be a reason why you're going that far back. Next are the references out of date. So you don't want to have an article that was published in, let's say, 2017, but all of the sources that they're using to support their ideas were from 1997. Because even though that article may have been published more recently, the information that they're basing it on is outdated. So you definitely want to take a quick glance through their references or their linked sources to see how recent the evidence is that they're using. How current does the information need to be for your topic? So I just discussed that. Your topic really guides how far back you can go when you're doing research for your information. Are all of the links working? So if you have a website and you're clicking on these links and nothing is really working, then that shows that the website is not well maintained. So the information might also be out of date. Next, we have the R in the CRAP test, which stands for relevance. So how does the information relate to your topic? You don't want to do research and find an article that you think is interesting and then use it just because you think is interesting. You have to find articles that are actually related to the topic and related to the point that you're trying to research. Next, who is the intended audience? So you might have an article that was written for specialists in the field, and if you're not a specialist in the field, then it might not be at the appropriate level for you. Or you might have articles that are written for kids who are in high school doing research on this topic, and again, that might not be appropriate because it's not at your level of being a college student. So looking into the intended audience can help you with determining if the information is appropriate to your level or to your needs. Also, the intended audience can indicate some biases in the article. So if an article is written and is trying to appeal to a Republican audience, then the way that they present information and the phrases that they would use, etc., would be different because they're trying to appeal to that audience. So the intended audience can shape the way that information is being presented. So you just want to try to keep your eye out for that. Next is the information appropriate at the appropriate level for your needs. That's what I just discussed. And have you looked at multiple sources before settling on this one? So you don't want to just pick an article and say, oh, hey, this answers all of my questions. That's it for me in my research. You want to look at multiple articles and verify this information before you actually use this one article in your paper. And also broaden your understanding of the topic by looking at multiple sources. Next, we have the A in the CRAP test, which stands for authority. So some questions to ask yourself. Who is the author, publisher, or organization? You want, and related to that, what are the author's credentials or organizational affiliations? So if you have an author, try to read a little bit about their publication history or their educational history, their credentials, because you want to make sure someone is qualified to write about the topic that they're writing about. If you have an article that's like medically related, but you read up about the author and everything that they've ever published and all of their academic credentials, their work history, etc., is in law, then they might not be qualified to write about a medical topic. So an author can have credentials, but you want to make sure it's credentials related to the topic that they're writing about and that you're researching. And with the organizational affiliations, so you want to keep your eye out for if this organization is affiliated with any group or any company that might create a bias in the information that they're presenting on their website. Next, is the author qualified to write about a topic that's related to what I just discussed? And then finally, does the URL reveal anything about the author or the source? So if it's a .edu, a .gov, a .org, or a .com. Now, typically, .edu sources are the most trustworthy because you have people who will review this information, do a peer review before it's published on their website or published in the journal. And so because we have that peer review process, we can more than likely trust .edu sources. .gov sources should be trustworthy. I say that with a little bit of caution because it's trustworthy in that you will have people who are, again, reviewing this information and verifying it before it's published, but you do have to question if your government has a certain agenda that they might be trying to push. Ideally, .gov sources should not have biases and they should be trustworthy, but just look a little bit more into it and make sure that an agenda is not being pushed with the information that's being presented on .gov sources. Next, we have .org sources. So these are organizations. There are a lot of .orgs that are completely unbiased and they're just presenting information. And then there are some .orgs that have certain religious affiliations, or they may have political affiliations, etc., that may influence the information that they're presenting and the way that they're presenting that information. So .orgs can be biased or they can be unbiased, but you just have to read with a critical eye. And then finally we have .com, and anyone can create a .com. So really look into that .com and make sure it's not just like a personal blog or just one person behind that screen putting out information that might not be verified. So do a little bit more research, look for other articles that's verifying this information before you go ahead and trust that .com. The next A we have in the CRAP test stands for accuracy. So some questions to ask: is the information supported by evidence? So if you have an article that's claiming something, but they have no research to back it up, no evidence to support them, then where are they getting this information from? Why should you believe what they're saying? So just keep an eye out for if the author is providing evidence to support their claims. Next, has the information been reviewed by specialists in the field? So this is referring to the peer review process that I just touched on. Typically, when you have an article that's been peer reviewed, it goes through a review process at every stage. So let's say I am a researcher and I want to conduct a research study. First, I have to write up a proposal and send it in to the IRB, which is a board that conducts all of the reviews for studies before they're conducted, and they approve or disapprove it. So the IRB is going to review this proposal and say, all right, you know what, everything looks good, the research methodology makes sense, etc. It's going to be ethically conducted. You can go ahead and conduct that experiment or that research study. And then I conduct my study, I write up the results, and I submit it to a journal. And the journal will have a panel of specialists in that field. So if I'm a scientist, they might have other scientists, science instructors, etc., who will review this information and say, okay, it was ethically conducted, research methodology makes sense, you can go ahead and publish it. If they see anything wrong with it, they send it back to me. I might have to redo a part of my experiment or revise something that I've written, etc., and I have to resubmit it for them to review again. So because of that peer review process, we can trust peer review sources, and peer review sources are typically published on journal articles, which are typically housed on .edu sites. So peer-reviewed articles are the best articles that you can find, the most trustworthy articles that you can find for your research papers. Next, does the language and tone seem unbiased and free from emotions? So it's okay for there to be some biases if it's clear, if the author makes it clear that this is a commentary or an opinion piece, etc. But if they are trying to present results of a research study, then there should not be biases or emotional words in there. And then finally, are there spelling, grammatical, or typographical errors? So a credible article should not have these types of errors in them. And then finally, we have the purpose, the P in the CRAP test, which stands for purpose. So some questions to ask. What is the purpose of the information? Is it to teach, sell, entertain, persuade, etc.? Again, it's okay for an article's purpose to be to persuade you to agree with something. However, they need to make that purpose clear if they're presenting information as an informational article, but they're trying to persuade you without making that explicit, then that is indicating that there might be some unethical biases in there. And an example of the purpose being unclear or unethical might be when we think about like a celebrity trying to sell you something on Instagram, and they might be promoting it by saying, oh, hey, they used it and it worked wonders for them, etc. Meanwhile, it's just an ad, and they never make it clear that it's an ad. They're just trying to present it as if they personally use it and they had results, when that might not have been the case. So that's an indication of them unethically trying to sell something. Next, does the author make his purpose clear? So again, it's fine for an article to have any of these purposes, but the author needs to make it clear what their purpose is. Are there political, ideological, cultural, or religious, institutional, or personal biases? So it's fine for an article to have these biases, but it needs to be clear, so that you can make the decision like, okay, you know what, I still want to use this article, or I want to ignore this article. But if they are trying to persuade you of something or insert their institutional biases in there, etc., without making it clear, then they're presenting that information unethically. So all of the things that I just went over, they typically apply to when you're doing just a Google search for your articles. If you're using a research database, then oftentimes that information has already been reviewed for credibility. So you don't need to necessarily look out for these things. You could still pay attention to it, but you need to really, really pay attention to these things when you're just using a search engine to find your articles, like Google.